Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte,
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito, del presente. E tutto questo esiste anche grazie a te.
Since 2009, a reality rooted in political, cultural and social dialogue. A place to compare ideas, to study, get to on major themes related to democracy, with the person's dignity always at the center. We are a community that fosters critical and participatory thinking. For us, words give rise to real commitments to regenerate words, define them, and enlighten them with meaning. Together, we build critical and participatory thinking. We intertwine different ideas, experiences, and perspectives. We offer young people spaces for real dialogue and comparison of ideas. We strengthen local communities through knowledge and participation. We foster genuine meetings and lasting relationships, a journey from the ego to the collective to reform politics starting from the people. We support transition projects and energy communities for a sustainable, inclusive and caring economy. Every reflection starts from an inner light. Rethinking democracy through fraternity and a central position of the person. The Group of 33, a space for dialogue, friendship and training. Our reform proposals published in our magazine. With us, you land alone and we take off together. Good morning everyone, and welcome to this first meeting of the several meetings, 5 meetings organized by our group on the occasion of the 2025 edition of the Rimini meeting. Thank you very much for being with us, and thanks to the speakers who are with us this morning for the time. This event is entitled Fraternity as the Root of Humanity, proposals to stitch the country back together. And that's organized by Comunità di Connessioni, whom we've tried to narrate, to illustrate to you through the video you've just watched. Comunità di Connessioni has been working for about 15 years. It's been providing free training on issues related to the political economy of our country. This is not the first time that the Foundation for Sussidiarietà and the Comunità di Connessioni are together at a stage here at the Rimini meeting. 2 years ago, our first meeting was organized, the first session was organized on the relationship between fraternity and politics. Today, we would like to make one step forward. We would like to analyze the paradigm of fraternity and actually make it tangible through proposals and projects. And for this, I'd like to leave the floor to Father Francesco Occhetta, who is the founder and coordinator of Comunità di Connessioni. I'd like to ask him to help us understand what we talk about when we talk about fraternity. First of all, thank you very much for your kind invitation. Thanks to the organizers of the meeting, of the Rimini meeting, especially Professor Vittadini, who's a dear friend for me and who's been a mentor for me over the last few years. The experience I live with you is an experience of fraternity. The sentence of Eliot that was chosen this year for the Rimini meeting is important. In the desert, the person finds her or himself again, and actually goes through the human temptations that combine social and personal life. So our Lord was tempted, for example, in appearing and having and in being. And these are the very true topics that our political life finds itself in. So the message could be, as Pope Francis asked the world, as well as also President Mattarella equally did in a very radical and strong way, to focus again on the principle of fraternity, to give strength and vigor to the two main principles which have led to consuming capitalism. Professor Vittadini actually wrote precisely this in the Sol 24 financial paper. And which also led to socialist systems which generated these equalities. And actually equality, without respecting the virtues of everybody. The principle of fraternity, as President Mattarella writes, is the principle which represents the authentic spirit of our republic, which is necessary to build the country. This was stated by him in the year 2000. And in the same year, in October, in October 2019, asked the world to rethink about fraternity, starting from what makes us brothers and sisters. If we kill children in Gaza today, if there are so many disorders and wars in the world, that's because the dimension of humanity, the human dimension, is no longer there, and our conscience is no longer capable of distinguishing, of telling the good from the evil. So together with the Sussidiarietà Foundation, today we make three major proposals. First, we would like to go back to a period of training based on this paradigm, because this led to the generation of our constitution, of the Human Rights Declaration. For example, Humus in Bangladesh revolutionized its country's Mandela, helped its country to get out of apartheid. And actually, there was a civil war which inhabited that land for 60 years, and that was put to an end. So the principle of fraternity can be termed actually the principle based on relations of some kind of emotional intelligence, but that means actually looking at the other to be able to recognize ourselves. That's the main point. That's a very lay principle. The people in the Enlightenment actually thought about this and then betrayed these principles. Actually, here the church is not saying anything new. To do this, however, we need to go back to the human meaning. In other words, we need to wonder what makes us human today. And we have to do it together, because fraternity is not distinctive. It is cultural. You have to choose it. And so we have to create a very strong alliance between us. We have to forge an inclusive alliance based on diverse experiences, which, however, look towards the same horizon, because this common horizon can help us look at what was before there was ascended. Then second, we need to have thinking communities. If we were able to exit the Second World War, that's because there were thinking communities who were capable of thinking of the future. And we are here today to be able to think about the future, to exit wars, to finish wars, and also to find again this meaning of justice, and to this meaning of social and political coexistence. The third point is that we need to start from words. The world is forged by words. So if we choose certain words and not others, we create worlds coming out of that. So we've done that from Professor Vittadini. We've tried to come out with a dictionary to, in a way, formulate certain words that are the words that make us brothers and sisters. So this model is the model we want to propose. It's basically targeted to everybody. We're now here in the Church of Jesus, of the Jesuits, within Connessioni. We have a website. We exchange writings and emails. Every month we have the chance to have continuous training. And actually what we propose is a method. It's a method based on people, and that's a community. So you're going to listen to people, and they're going to tell you very interesting things. They're very competent people. Actually, I spent some years with them, and these are people who are trained, both spiritually, they're trained in terms of competence, they bet on a community, and they love their country, and they offer their experiences to their country. And actually, we're also looking forward to having you with us as well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Father Francesco. A little while ago, before coming on stage, we were chatting, trying to, in a way, understand what the origin of the contents you're going to listen to today. All speakers told me that it was fundamental for them to reflect on the title of the meeting. In places of the desert, we build with new bricks. We realized that they were faced with many desert places. look at the international dimension, the geopolitical dimension, just look at the news in the morning and look at the atrocities that are perpetrated in the many different conflicts. But there are lots of deserts which are less striking, so to say, which, however, inhabit everyone's daily experience. And so our speakers first of all tried to research these places. So we basically tried to look for bricks building these worlds through research and competences. So this morning I would like to start my discussion with Rosalba Famà, who is a researcher in European law, who is well-versed in the history and the mechanisms governing the Union. So if we start from a fact, over the last few months, there's an image coming out of Europe, coming out of the news of Europe. That's the image of a Europe which is not strong, of a Europe, of a continent which finds it hard to find a common cohesion. So this is some kind of a difficult moment for Europe. So my question to you is exactly this. Is this exactly the moment that Europe is going through? Thank you very much, Francesca, for this question, and good morning, everyone. We are certainly facing in Europe and in the world a very complex and delicate moment. There's a sentence which reads that there's a week in which decades happen and decades in which nothing happens. And we have to say that we are precisely in that stage. We find it hard because there's so much going on at the moment. I'd like to start from this analysis. So starting from the pandemic, a whole series of pillars that the European Union had founded, had based its social and economic well-being have gradually collapsed. And this is something that we can see. If you think about the international cooperation climate that we had in 2015 when the Paris Agreement was signed, and back then countries would agree on diminishing CO2 emissions, but that cooperation is no longer there. There's no longer cooperation, there's rather competition. And this competition is muscular in a way. It is based on customs duties, it is characterized by war, and so on. So the model that the Europe was based on, so cooperation and international training, is gradually being disgregated. Just think of energy. Up to the war with the Ukraine, we would actually buy that energy from the Russian, from the CIS, and actually there are sanctions and they have an economic cost for us as well, and our societies and us as taxpayers are bearing this cost, the cost of this radical the radical choice that we made in supporting the aggressed country. I have a grandfather who's about to turn 90. In any moment we're together, he always reminds me of how ugly, of how bad the war was. This memory should recall our collective memory. We went through decades of peace thanks to the European Union. And if you think about the words of Schuman of the 9th of May 1950, his words were, world peace cannot be safeguarded without creative efforts. And these creative efforts, in our case, consisted in the creation of a common market based on steel and iron. And actually, it was the products that were essential to wage war to one another. So the idea was to share these resources, to create a common market of these resources so that war could no longer be waged because it would be economically very disadvantaged or impossible. So this creative effort gave us decades of peace. And I'd like also to add another remark with reference to what Francesca said a couple of minutes ago. As these pillars are now disgregating, we're now facing a time in which there's an ongoing change. This is some kind of an interbrain. There's an age coming that is about to come to an end, and a new age is about to begin. But we find it hard to see the contours of this global order as our leaders defined it when they met in Washington some weeks ago. Europe finds it difficult to actually understand this new era, but Europe is also a democratic process. So Europe brings with itself mediation, and this process means that we need to listen to what European citizens demand. So there is this effort, but that's the most beautiful effort we can make, because we are in a world in which democracy is no longer the main model. However, it is being paired by other models going in other dimensions. So what is now seen as a weakness should instead be our strength to preserve what's there. So what can Europe do today tangibly to make a positive contribution to society? Actually, I think that this contribution can be based on an experience that has already been made during the pandemic. In managing the pandemic, the health crisis, the European Union has shown a thrust based on solidarity, an incredible spirit of solidarity, which is a secular expression of fraternity. So just think of when many workers were laid off due to lockdowns. And this, to pay for this, many countries, including Italy, had to issue debt at a high cost, given their already high levels of debt. And this enabled us to, in a way, support people who were in dire straits. The second example is probably the most famous one, the NRRP funds, lots of billions of euros to provide immediate support to the economy, which you took from the financial markets to grant subsidies, as well as to, in a way, fund research to discover a vaccine against COVID-19. So the European Union can provide tangible answers. This answers are the so-called European common assets, and that's practically the promotion of the concept of solidarity. Any form of government can give if there is added value. So there are certain things for which countries alone cannot make it. So let's think of the investments that are needed in the field of artificial intelligence. We're talking about huge resources that should be mobilized if we are to speak with a strong voice in the development of those technologies. So each country alone couldn't make it, but the Union together can. So cybersecurity, that's yet another thing. Every country could benefit from that, and that's yet another tangible example. Or, for example, scientific research in the medical field. In all these cases, it clearly emerges that if you join forces, if you join resources, if you go beyond selfishness and the right return, when we talk about actually a common budget, actually you do realize, you do achieve an actual form of fraternity, and you're better prepared to face the challenges that lie before you. So an important element that should be faced, should be discussed in the public discussions, especially in coming years, is also to think about this, to think about actually the logic of fraternity, and to have the human person, so to put people at the heart of the European project. Thank you very much. Okay, we've heard about research. Scientific research is one of the key pillars that can contribute to Europe's development. And now I'd like to turn to Luca Santoro. He is a mechanical engineering researcher, to ask him whether it makes sense to talk about fraternity in scientific research, which seems perhaps only apparently more impersonal. Thank you very much, Francesca. Well, fraternity, as Fratelli Tutti reminds us, begins with realizing the value of every human being, always and in every circumstance. If we take that value seriously, and for example, we call it technology, technology cannot be just about efficiency or profit. At a European level, everybody's talking about Industry 5.0, so a vision that puts the well-being of workers and the resilience of territories at the center. So that means that we are involving the human being and considering the person as central, as well as the resilience of territories. Since 2023, the European Union is bringing together policymakers, universities and businesses in a community of practice to promote this human-centric innovation, to kind of connect the dots characterized by that characterize human-centric innovation in technology. In other words, we can say that the industrial challenge of the future very much coincides with the meeting of this session. So we try to mend the country together through new links between knowledge, work, and community, and the community. A first concrete step of my contribution is open source hardware. That, according to this definition of the Open Source Hardware Association, making projects, source files, and bills of materials public. This means allowing anyone to study, to modify, to produce, to replicate and sell these devices. For example, in Turin, in the Fab Lab, which are common places in which students, managers, and businesses have everything they need to make a prototype. So, for example, a lathe, a microcontroller, or a 3D printer. So they kind of join forces. You have several people joining forces, meaning students and businesses, to create prototypes. Projects are open and they are publicized on the web. During the pandemic, this concept has turned into action. I mean, it became really tangible. So the MIT event team, from the MIT in Boston, published online a ventilator that could be made with hardware components for less than $100, with components that can be really found anywhere. Also, at the Polytechnic in Milan, there was a MEV project that was capable of ventilating multiple patients simultaneously, and that was released under a GPL license that could be, in a way, replicated by everybody. These are acts of operational fraternity. So shared knowledge becomes immediate care. It becomes immediate health care. But we're talking about opening projects that were, in a way, implemented during the COVID pandemic, during a health crisis. If we are to replicate this on an industrial scale, we need to talk about resources, so economic resources and mental resources. And this leads me to the second topic of my contribution, which is actually frugal innovation. This is where frugal innovation comes into play. This is the art of doing more with less for many people. Recent studies have shown that these frugal solution systems not only reduce environmental and energy costs of technology, but it accelerates its adoption in vulnerable contexts. For example, when we talk about minor economies or underdeveloped countries. ChatGPT yesterday networked a specific subscription for India at the price of which is actually which is 25% only of the total price of the subscription. Then the Foldscope is a $1 paper microscope designed at Stanford University. It was then distributed in rural schools around the world, and there are millions of students who are currently using it. So we're talking about something in cardboard that had, in a way, ushered in a new scientific literacy, where actually microscopes were not present. So frugality, and I'd like this to be very clear, doesn't mean technological property. It is something that is easy to be scaled, but that doesn't mean that it is technologically poor. So frugality means ethical elegance. It's the ability to maximize any invested euro into the social impact of every euro invested. The third pillar of my speech is the principle of subsidiarity. The European Union describes it as a criterion whereby the authority closest to the citizens should be able to act when it's best placed to do so. The Commission's 2023 report notes that where national parliaments are involved in the core design, then the quality of the regulation improves, as well as does trust in institutions increases. The Foundation for Subsidiarity has been documenting this for years in its reports. When there's a culture of subsidiarity, this improves infrastructure, governance, and this also makes development more inclusive. So, 3 main points I have sketched so far. What conclusions can we draw? Universities, municipalities, SMEs, and the third sector must sit at the same table from the very beginning of the design of every machine central plan. So these 3 strands are open source hardware, subsidiarity, and frugality, the frugality of innovations. And this leads to my proposal, which is that of establishing a national fund for open and frugal hardware dedicated to projects that release construction plans under OSHWA licenses that use recyclable materials and involve local partners throughout the supply chain. This fund should operate in a network with university fab labs and the proximity hubs of the NRRP, funded by the NRRPs, that could actually finance prototypes for local healthcare, small-scale agri-tech, and soft mobility. So technology actually for small farms, as well as, like I said, smart, soft mobility. Each prototype, once presented, would have to pass a double assessment. The first one is social impact, measured in benefits for communities and low-cost replicability. So this low-cost replicability is particularly important in order for the project to be scaled. This would give us a shared engine of innovation that also responds to the constitutional mandate of Article 118 that states that the state and the autonomous regions shall promote the initiative of individual citizens and associations. And this embodies also the line drawn by Industry 5.0. I believe that fraternity to date is the scarcest and most decisive productive factor in our time. It should be turned into the backbone of our workshops, laboratories, and institutions. And this means embracing the openness of knowledge, the sobriety of resources, and the proximity of decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Santoro, for explaining that technology and fraternity can be together and dialogue. And when it comes to this topic, I would like to ask a question to Mrs. Alvisi. Ms. Alvisi, it's a provocation I've already made. Finance, too, is not really the first domain that comes to mind when we talk about fraternity. So as a PhD student in finance, I would like to know how we can stitch all the fabric together, starting from finance. Thank you very much, Francesca. I think that, first of all, it is necessary to rediscover the human profile underlying financial relationships. We know very well that finance prescribes how the intertemporal value can be created. However, it is also called upon to become a proximity tool. In which way? Communicating clearly to citizens. When we talk about exclusion, financial exclusion, which is a phenomenon in emerging economies and as well as in advanced ones, this is linked to the low level of knowledge when it comes to finance, the financial literacy of the world's population. The inquiry, the Bank of Italy survey on financial literacy and competence of Italians shows that education has a significant impact on financial knowledge, on behaviors and attitudes when it comes to finance. Just think about the fact that those having a university degree or a PhD holder not only show a higher level of financial literacy, but also more sophisticated skills in processing information to make decisions when it comes to financing and investment. Aware decisions of financial education, as we call it today, therefore, is an institutional tool for guiding informed behavior. And this is of fundamental importance, guaranteeing in this way citizens' right to knowledge of the rational principles on which a sound and prudent management of individual and collective money should be based. It establishes, therefore, financial education, carries out the logical and political link that exists between the financial literacy and participation of citizens to the economic life of a country. So financial inclusion is a prerequisite for the active participation of individuals to collective life. It is instrumental in acquiring the economic citizenship that the Nobel Prize-winning economist Amartya Sen identified as the ability to transform primary goods, economic goods, into the ability to pursue one's goals for the future. We understand that strengthening the degree of financial inclusion by promoting financial education is a horizon of institutional action that is aimed at individuals, but also in their relational dimension of cooperation in the resource management. It is the thread that can be used to weave together the fabric of financial relations. It is, but in light of fraternity, in a spirit of fraternity, in which even debt, what I owe, and credit, what is owed to me, are no longer perceived in terms of a relation of power between stakeholders, but as an intersubjective dimension of participation in the gains and assets and losses of the others, and which recognizes in cooperation the real value of the cooperation between parties. We are immersed in an age of global loneliness. A new inclusive financial paradigm can play a fundamental role in achieving sustainable friendship in the long term. Fraternity, financial fraternity, is an antidote to the logic of conflict and abuse, especially in a context in which reciprocity represents an individual and global challenge at the same time. Therefore, facilitating participation in monetary exchanges between individuals and between countries responds to the need to support the co-design of common improvement objectives. Some studies on behavioral finance highlight that monetary exchanges and the participation to these exchanges make more efficient and therefore cooperation between social partners and helps reduce exposure to conflict. In order to be effective, that institutional proximity of the financial system must take into account the structural heterogeneity of the entities on which we are called upon to act. Only by finding this human dimension is it possible for financial inclusion to become the bearer of full financial fraternity. In this perspective, we must acknowledge that finance not only for the individual, but also for individuals recognize that proper money management is a fundamental lever for managing the collective future of a country. So we should have access, include and guarantee participation to the markets, and also the ability to make decisions that distinguish between virtuous financial behaviors and those that tend to go to the detriment of the heritage of a family or a company or a business or a family. So the inclusive nature of financial education is also reflected in the special attention being given to the most vulnerable groups. Poverty, educational poverty. Let's think about women who, due to persistent wage inequality, are exposed to the risk of abuse and economic violence, migrants. To this end, a synergic action by institutions, the financial sector, and associations in developing best practices for financial inclusion must pursue the dual objective of limiting the cases of self-exclusion from participation in the financial system by a section of the population that tends to perceive itself as unsuitable to participate. On the other hand, it is also necessary to invest at the population level in the enabling potential of financial education. I'd like to conclude by reiterating President David Sassoli's call for democratic governance of momentous changes at local and global level. A widespread financial education strategy would enable a more digital and inclusive financial system to define a new paradigm of financial fraternity, promoting development and innovation with a view to social justice. So we must discover in sharing the multiplying effect of the little becoming the collective much, and to allow human relationships based on encounter and reciprocity to redesign in every territory some prospects for the community. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Alvisi. If we had to summarize the proposal in a slogan, what would it be? The slogan would be financial education is the way to restore the human value of financial relationships through inclusive citizenship. Thank you. Thank you very much. So after this first part of our dialogue, which is a little bit more technical and which is inspired by the world of research, I would like to move on to the second part by dealing with some topics which are dear to the Fondazione per la Sussidiarietà and Connessioni, so work and institutional topics. We have Mr. Cafiero, a lawyer specializing in job-related laws, and I would like to ask what is, when we talk about the world, the sector of job, which is the space which should be the core of our dialogue today? From my point of view, I smell the dust, so to say, of the businesses, so I can give you real data on today's job world. It looks like an oxymoron, but there's a great need of fraternity at this moment. It's an oxymoron because we are accustomed to considering the world of jobs as a clash between several sectors. The situation is changing now. If we do not recover an intergenerational sense of fraternity, the job sector runs the risk of depopulation and self-destruction, to be even more pessimistic. We no longer have so many young people. We have about 370,000 newborns in 2025, with a decrease in the Italian active population. And there's an intergenerational fracture between those aged over 50 and the very young people. Those aged over 50, 60, and 70 have stopped dialoguing with debating with the young people because there's no common ground, no common themes. We would have asked ourselves when it comes to the AI. Today, paradoxically, we must ask ourselves how the artificial intelligence can save jobs. Having such a scarce active population. So reading the data, we can say that the data are not the best ones. When it comes to the companies, we have over 10 million people aged over 50, double the figure vis-à-vis 10 years ago. And in 2050, the age between 15 and 65 years will represent about 35% of the population. So vis-à-vis this scenario, as the Comunità di Connessioni, along with the Fratelli Tutti Foundation, what can we do? Well, first of all, and I would not like to say this because I want to defend our generation, we should relaunch the people, the active people aged 40. They can act as a sort of a belt, a transmission belt when it comes to the language between the very young people and those aged over 55 or 60. Starting from 2008, after the Lehman Brothers crisis, the career pathways of these people aged 40 were interrupted. And so through the artificial intelligence, using ChatGPT, I carried out research on the most fashionable terms. Delulu means a disillusionment state, which is hard to be explained to those aged over 50. So there is no surprise that during the recruitment phase, a person is greeted by hearing someone saying, "We will let you know." I had a vacation in Sicily, and there are many parents having very young children. So I wondered, how will it be possible to people aged over 70 to decipher, to understand the language of their very young children? This did not happen in the past because the brothers could speak a common language between themselves. So the first proposal is relaunching the careers of these people aged 40. And then there's an old Wolof proverb, a language spoken in Senegal. The elderly know the streets, and the young people run fast. So this is what we should take into account when we talk about intergenerational fraternity. We often wonder why there is an unequal mismatch, why competences and skills are not conveyed, are not transmitted. But we should ask ourselves why and where there is an interruption of the transmission of the language between the elderly and the youngest generations. We cannot expect Gen Z to be trained with the proper skills that are useful to enter the market of the job market. We tend to think that the expansion contract should be a passive policy, so a sort of redundancy plan rather than a successful example of active policy. The second important proposal is relaunching the transmission and the passage from one generation to the other of the skills and competencies, and then the fact that many young people having a university degree decided to go away from Italy and to go work somewhere else in some other countries. We also wonder why these young people do not manage to be paid properly by the businesses. The Italian wages should grow by at least 2.5% this year. We should use the tools already made available by the law. We have a law on the participation that enables to pay more through productivity-linked objectives. It's a win-win approach because the workers get paid more and the businesses also take advantage of the better productivity of their workers. And there's a welfare state that should also be used in order to increase the purchasing power of the consumers. After the pregnancy, how comes that a mother or a father do not manage to have a greater purchasing power? Because they are not considered a category that can benefit from welfare facilitations. You need to show me that I belong to a category. This is wrong. We should base ourselves on an employment journey based on different phases. In a certain phase of one's working life, it should be legitimate for a worker to gain more due to the events of that specific phase of their life. But we should not neglect the people aged over 50. They are the backbone of the businesses right now in Italy. So we should also focus on them by taking care of their physical and not only physical health. And I would like to conclude by conveying another image, that of the embrace. So after there was a young person that was trained and an elderly worker. They embraced themselves, and the young person said, "Thank you for the training you provided to me." And the elderly said, I thank you because I felt useful thanks to the fact that I managed to train you. So the embrace is the embrace that Alda Merini proclaimed in her verses. We embrace to find ourselves whole. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. We said earlier that alongside the reflection and work, there has always been a reflection on the reforms. We have Paolo Bonini here on the institutional reforms that our country needs. Paolo Bonini has made these issues the focus of his studies. I would like to ask you, does the Italian constitution still incorporate the paradigm of fraternity? And how can we orient our decision-making system towards this principle? And if this is the case, how can this be done? Thank you very much for this question. Well, fraternity does exist in the fabric of our constitution, even if it is not explicitly written down. It needs to be looked for in the various provisions, but it can be found, most of all when it comes to some principles. When the constitution entrusts the republic with the task to safeguard the development of the individual, so the safeguard of the relations between the people in the social formations, becoming persons, not just individuals. As for today's topic, we find some elements in the second part of the Constitution related to the decision-making processes. And there are many aspects that can be mentioned. We can identify three elements. The first one, when it comes to the choice of representative democracy, which is not a trivial aspect, especially in a period in which we saw the various shades of a so-called direct democracy that offered solutions that are not always feasible or correct. So thinking about a parliament where there is debate for a general shared solution is already a fraternity-related option. Secondly, the organization and protection of intermediate bodies, so political parties and trade unions. Their function is that of selecting candidates and organizing the social bodies, and then pluralism in the choice to orient decisions towards pluralism. So within the political parties, carrying out decision-making with a democratic system, Constitution opens up to juxtaposing ideas in order to find a synthesis. We are not a protected democracy in Italy. The Constitution doesn't establish any limits except for the limitation to a second creation of the fascist party. So in light of the Constitution, we deal with dynamics, a concrete reality, and the Constitution here too gives us the fundamental principle of subsidiarity. As we know, the vertical subsidiarity, where the closest level to the citizen does not succeed, we have the higher level, and also horizontal subsidiarity, where the state does not succeed, the citizens can organize themselves. So the two fundamental theses for a reform and the proposals for reform can help us read the reforms bearing in mind the key of subsidiarity. The first thesis proposes to change the decision-making system by accompanying the political parties with the third sector entities when identifying the candidates. For a set of reasons, political parties in this very delicate phase have not succeeded, and we would shift from the intermediate bodies paradigm to the paradigm of intermediate communities, because there's a world behind the entities, the third sector entities. Then we've been talking about reforms for the past 40 years. And the second thesis, the vertical subsidiarity, proposes not so much to modify, to change the European decision-making process, taking stock that the European Union creates a law which is very close to all the states, to all the member states. The thesis is that of synchronizing the parliamentary institutes by uniforming them. So approaching the European Union from the inside of our institutions. So obviously, these are theses that should be debated, but as we know, the Constitution also contains another substratum, and the challenges are on this level. Think about digitalization and participation. These are the two challenges, and these theories clash with these two elements. And digitalization also runs the risks of being considered an absolute element. It should be considered as a tool, not as an absolute element. It happened in the Eastern countries where a YouTuber with his own YouTube channel, considered a conspiracy YouTube channel, managed to organize a real party that ran for the elections. And this tells us a lot about so many self-referential answers and the degree of solitude. Whereas if we consider it as a tool and we accompany it with social training and civil training, we would be able to rebuild the fabric of society. So this should be the starting point. We should start from training processes that put together territories and also use new languages, even the language of digitalization, as tools. I will not take any more time. I would like to thank you very much for your attention.
Grazie. E sulla scia di questo
So after this intervention, I would like to leave the floor to Mr. Mulazzani from the Foundation for Subsidiarity to help us deal with the framework of today's presentations. Thank you very much. I would like to greet all of you. Good afternoon to you all. I've been hearing some very concrete, practical proposals that develop the paradigm of fraternity as mentioned at the beginning by Father Occhetta. On this ground, we had the same kind of sentiment, same kind of feelings between the Connessioni community and the Foundation for Subsidiarity. I think this is a good starting point for carrying out a very good work and for improving a dialogue that can be continued in the future. I would like to go back to basics, so to say. So making this very short reflection, the relationship between democracy and subsidiarity is not as seen in the previous interventions, the previous presentation. It is not a procedural kind of relationship. It is a substantial relationship. I will explain this statement in the best way I can. Subsidiarity today can really become, since it was introduced in 2001 as a programmatic principle, but at the time, some said it could not be so easily made dynamic. It remained static. It was a sort of an ideal principle. Today, thanks to the developments of the laws and of jurisprudence, subsidiarity becomes a driving force for social dynamics, and also it also becomes a practical principle for building a whole human being. So there are some developments that are very interesting, which make the value of subsidiarity within the set of laws very topical. So to justify how subsidiarity can really become an antidote to the crisis of democracy, we should start from a de facto consideration remark. There are many reports. I will not make a list of them because of time restraints, but many were published that describe that the level of democracy and democratization of states is constantly declining, especially the perception of democracy on the part of citizens is declining constantly. Therefore, it was stated that autocracies seem to become stronger, whereas democracies seem to be losing ground. And this entails complexity, dialogue, which is not envisaged by autocracies, and autocracies in some cases are more efficient, or they are considered to be more efficient, because democracy is deprived of its own soul, of its own meaning. Therefore, the lack of trust in democracy led to a lack of trust in rulers, in policy, in the function of the political representatives, in the ability of the voters to have a real say and to have consequences with their votes on politics and on policy. And this leads to a deficit of political representation. So disillusionment towards politics describes precisely that populism is growing, individualism is also growing, the lack of commitment when it comes to politics, and polarization also grows. Michael Sandel, an American philosopher, back in the 90s, wrote a book titled The Tired Democracy. So in the 90s, the democracy was already experiencing a crisis. David Brisman, in a book published in the 1950s, talked about a solitary crowd. So the person is a prisoner to individualism and is described as a mass person, mass man. So a solitary crowd focusing on individualism goes against or goes in favor of the lonely man ruling a whole country. So the answer, and we need to be brave when it comes to these topics, is that of building a political, social community with the aim to pursue the common good for all. And this requires for all the factors to be taken into account. A topical reading of the word subsidiarity, so getting back to politics, getting back to active citizenship, political participation. So the crisis of the political parties is the main element that explains the current crisis of democracies. It is linked to the lack of quality of the proposals of the political parties, the mass political parties that contributed to establishing democracy in Italy and to make it and to keep it alive, are now experiencing a period of crisis. They are sort of tired. So there's a scarce ability to make credible and realistic forecasts when it comes to the future. In 1921, a writer said that the political parties create chaos in a multitude of voters. Is it still possible to state this when it comes to political parties? Tocqueville said that without the intermediate bodies, there's no possibility to refund or reform policy. And therefore, relaunching politics passes through the relaunching of the social communities, intermediate societies, intermediate communities that can become the backbone of the parties, that can give lymph to the political parties. The intermediate bodies are the places where the desire is enlivened, and where men and women, when people can perceive themselves in relation, so the ego in relation to others, which is the basic element of the relaunching of a liberal democracy. So from this point of view, as it is clear from all the previous interventions, the people are in relation with the others. They can change opinion, they can ask questions, they can provide an effective, a real contribution. So the ground on which democracy lays or falls has to do with the relaunching of the political parties. There's a concrete proposal which is added to other aspects, the implementation of Article 49 of the Constitution of the Italian state. The parties are, on the one hand, the backbone of the democracy. They are a key element of the representation of political communities. They should be the representatives of real political communities where debate is always alive. On the other hand, they have a juridical, a legal shape by which they are unrecognized political formations, although they have an obligation when it comes to the financial aspects, for instance. So this is a dichotomy that should be solved sooner or later. So the implementation of Article 49 of the Italian Constitution, giving full citizenship to and a full role to the political parties. To conclude, I would like to repeat a sentence by President of the Republic, Mr. Mattarella, this year, when the foundation awarded him the prize for subsidiarity, because it is very important. It is a very important statement, because today we really need to reconnect rights, subsidiarity, and democracy. President said that the plural identity of our local and social communities are the result of people getting towards a common target, and they participate in building the pathway for the common good of our society. In this way, democracy becomes real. Democracy is made up of substance, not just form. It is substantial, not procedural. Equality of citizens, which is implemented by making social rights effective through the intervention of the public service and any other stakeholder that can have a role in the well-being of the country. The culture of subsidiarity is what pushes to create a system between the relation between the social realities and public power. Therefore, subsidiarity does not imply necessarily a public power to withdraw. It requalifies the public intervention. The public intervention is needed in order to correct the failures of the market. Otherwise, the market will not correct itself. This is one of the examples of the failure of neoliberalism. So I think that from this point of view, in this context that I've just described, the challenges that were outlined are of fundamental importance to continue focusing on the dialogue and focusing on the fundamental elements to produce thinking communities and to give substance to the democratic principle that was mentioned by the previous speakers. Thank you very much. So we have concluded this morning's dialogue, and it seems to me that there are very clear points that have emerged that are linked with the title of the meeting. The first one is that the desert is not a physical place, it is a human and social place. And this emerges from all the contributions in all the presentations. I saw a desire, a stimulus towards going towards what is other than us. So not the moving towards the other, someone who is different from myself. And this is also a way to direct the political and social action. Well, I think that the relationship element emerged from all the interventions, financial education, reform of political parties, etc. And this is linked to the invitation made by Pope Francis in Fraternity, where he wrote that only by acknowledging and being aware of the integral value of a person is it possible to move along the pathway of social fraternity. So I think that we can say that this is a cultural kind of work. It requires training and the training of the gaze, a training of our way of looking to other people. Otherwise, it all remains a sort of an intellectual exercise. So I think that all the contributions highlighted the need to go out of our words and relate to the others. And the other element which is impressive to me is that we think about new bricks when we read the title of this year's meeting. But it seems to me that we can say that we do not start from scratch. After this morning, there are already examples of social friendship, collaboration, training, such as a friendship linking the Foundation for Sussidiarietà and the Comunità di Connessioni, and also the meeting itself, which is a relational place for dialogue and therefore a place for cultural education. I would like to remind you of the Dona Ora initiative. Each of us can give a practical and decisive contribution to supporting the meeting. And you can do this by finding the Dona Ora kiosks. You recognize them. There's a red heart. And I would like to remind you that the Meeting Foundation is a third sector entity. If you donate to the meeting, you can benefit from tax facilitations when drafting, filling in your income declaration. So enjoy the meeting. Thank you very much for your attention.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si
che
batte.
approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo esiste anche grazie a te.